Good morning, church. All right, I know usually I make a lot of announcements, or Deb or somebody else does as well. I'm going to invite you to just keep watching that. But I want to have a conversation. If we had a stool up front rather than sitting at the altar, but I need to do this in as gentle a way as that I can, and I need to share it because it's my heart, but it's also important as far as it relates to the church. And I want to share a couple of pieces of background information, and I've made myself some notes so that I don't forget to say the important parts of what I want to say to you this morning. When I was in my second church, while I was still a student pastor, not even a senior pastor, I was under a man who I think many of you met a few weeks back. It's a couple of months back now, but my friend Robert Robertson and his wife Catherine were my senior pastor, and they were in essence my bosses. I was a student pastor there. And while I was there, we did a couple of courses together towards my undergrad degree in psychology. We dealt with a subject from a series of books of a man written by a man named Lyle Shallow. And the topic that we were dealing with was the psychology of change. So this goes back close to 30 years ago now for me in dealing with this. And the second course that I can remember that we did specifically was an independent study that I helped design the curriculum for and got approval from the school that I was at, dealing with institutional change. So part of my background is dealing with psychology of change and the very reality of institutional change. And the Sunday that I candidated here, before you called me to be a pastor, I talked to you about the necessity of change, the reality of change, the effect of change. And what I didn't say that Sunday that I want to say to you today before I go specifically into what I want to share this morning is that without change, we actually get left behind, we stagnate, and then we eventually die. Isn't that a nice tone? I don't know why that one's got a tone.
Because I put it in.
Thank you. Every body of water in the world that has life in it, that sustains life, has an inflow and an outflow of water. That means that they're constantly changing. In order to sustain life, the bodies of water are constantly changing. There's one body of water in the world, other than your stagnant pools and those kinds of things, that is very well known that doesn't have an inflow and an outflow. It's the Dead Sea. It's called the Dead Sea specifically because no life is sustained in it, because there's no inflow and no outflow. This church, I know for many of you, has been dearly the same for a great many of years. And I know that many people want it to remain the same as it's always been. But I raise this point to say this. I talked to you before you called me about the necessity of change. Talked about the advantages and disadvantages and the difficulties and the blessings and all of that. And I realize that I'm changing things in the church, and it's affecting many of you in a negative way. And for that part of the effect, I'm sorry that it is affecting you. And that's sincere. That my heart does feel that effect that it has on you. And maybe what I haven't done is we've been changing things as we've been coming through the months together, is done a good enough job of explaining why we're doing what we're doing. I'm not changing things just to upset your apple cart in your life. I'm really not. It's not who I am. It's not how my heart is geared. I want to raise a question for you this morning to think about. How many of you are getting the same medical care that you were getting 40, 50, and 60 years ago? Is anyone getting the same medical care? No, why not? Because medicine's changed. Treatment's changed. Medicine is still medicine, but how they do medicine is different. Isn't that true? They've made advances in medicine that are for our welfare. And in technology, I started to think about this. I can remember, and I'm not as old as some of you can probably remember further back than this. I can remember having a black and white television with the rabbit ears that you had aluminum foil on and kind of stood like this to try to get reception, and you could get maybe 6 channels at most even doing that. Television systems have changed. How we receive information. The TVs themselves that we watch them on. You know, the ones that are about that thick, that mount on your wall and that are like this big. And do you remember when you used to burn out tubes? You could literally hear them like sizzling and popping and things. And they've made advances in all of how they design things. Oh, I didn't bring it here. I hold the capacity to reach around the world in my hand. Faster than most of us can conceive of thinking, never mind actually getting the information. I remember when answering machines first came out, and how annoyed we all were that we would reach an answering machine. Telephones were rotary dial, and,
yes.
You know, and even when I started in ministry in 1990, full-time in ministry, the town that I served in, you only had to dial the last 5 digits. You didn't even have to dial all 7. I can remember the party lines, but just barely, because it was at my grandma's house. Telephones now are computers that you hold in your hand that reach around the world, and I have one today. You get instant messages. I sent my brother a message this morning. Hey, I'm thinking of you, praying for you. Pray that your day is a great day and that you're blessed in worship. I didn't get this morning. I was in Sunday school, but he just wrote back, thanks. I'm praying that God sets your pulpit ablaze with every other thing, with every other pulpit in America. Instant. Things are changing in our world today in significant ways. Automobiles. Now, I know Paul's not here. Paul's still driving the same automobile type that he would have driven as a child because that's his preference, right? But are we driving the same style of cars that we were? I watched an amazing video this past week of one of those 1950s filled with metal and chrome. And you remember those big cars with the tails and the bumpers that weighed like more than you and, you know, that kind of stuff? And a 2009, I think it was maybe a Toyota. It doesn't even matter the kind of car it was. But, you know, with fiberglass and plastic. And there was a head-on collision that was filmed with these cars. Which car do you think wiped out the other car? You would think it would be the 1950s with the metal and the chrome and the weight. The 50s car literally was crumpled by the Toyota. Now, the frame of the Toyota was also damaged, don't get me wrong. But literally, they've built your cockpit of your car to protect you. Now, that thing stays intact, even in those amazing collisions. You could see multiple live shots of these cars collapsing on one another. How we read, how we get news, how we convey information, the music that we listen to, it's all changed today. And everywhere in society, things are changing. Churches that don't change are being left behind because we have no inflow and no outflow. And I don't want to change things just for the sake of changing them, but here's my heart. This is my heart and why I want to share this morning. The changes that we make. Someone said it this way, and they were right about this. If we came in and changed everything all at once, that would have really freaked everybody out. We've come in and we've changed things, and what we're doing is changing them slowly, but we're changing them consistently, and people are freaking out because it's something new all the time. I don't know how to best make it most comfortable for you all, but change is necessary for this reason. Here at CCMC specifically, without changing, we don't have long left. We have to have an inflow of people. We have to bring folks here. My heart is for the church. I've always loved the church since I came into the church. Not just my church, but God's church. It's His church. And I love the body of Christ. And Deb and I are here, and we're loving this church. And I'm trying to love the church back to life. You came through a serious trauma that led through many different forms of death. And many people are grieving those forms of death in our body. The changes that we're making, though, are intentional because we want to be a church that's a friendly, welcoming, open church that invites people beyond this community of small group to be a part of who we are so that we have a hope and a future, a life beyond that. We want to sustain life going forward. That's why we're changing what we're changing. I think we're all that are here, people that would say they love this church. At least that's what we're supposed to do, right? Is to love the church. But do we love it enough to say that we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that it has a future as well as a history, a future as well as a past? We need to reach out to our community. We need to make these changes that we're making in order to be able to be ready to receive the people that are necessary for us to have life, or else we will die. I didn't come here with the intention of seeing us die. I don't believe any of you are here with the intention of seeing us die. But because the change has been upsetting to so many folks, what's happening is people are grumbling and complaining and becoming even embittered about the change. And so much so that I've already got 4 pages of notes, 3.5 pages of notes on what the Bible says about murmuring, complaining, malice, what we're supposed to do with that, the effect of it, and all of that, because that's what's happening. And we're grumbling and all of that kind of stuff, and that's gonna eat away at the church more than the change, and probably even more than not changing. That murmuring and complaining and grumbling will kill this church faster than anything else that we have. It's a disease that needs to be set apart, and the reason I'm sharing this morning is to say to you, I want you to understand my heart. My heart is for the church. It's for us to have a hope and a future, a life together. And so the changes are brought about to try to accomplish that. I'm not trying to do everything different than you've done it before. I mean, everything we do isn't different than what you've done it before. What we're doing is what you've done differently. And there's a subtle difference in that, but it's an important difference. We're doing what we do differently. Music is still being done. It's being done differently. But there's still the traditional setting as well. Outreach. We want to do that differently. Christian education, we want to do that differently. Why? Because we're trying to become more effective to reach our community. It's so amazingly annoying.
But do you pay attention to it when it makes the noise?
So I want to start there instead of having made a whole bunch of announcements, because I want you to hear the heart that I have. And this is what I want to say. If you have question, comment, or concern about anything you see or hear or are experiencing, please know my heart, but more than know my heart, please come to us. Come to us and ask about it. Ask us why we're doing it. Don't complain about it. Find out what the purpose of it is. Because maybe once you understand the purpose, it'll be easier to buy into. You might even find yourself excited about it and want to be a part of it. So please, for the welfare of the church, just as we've changed in every other area of our life, be willing to be open to the changes that will give us here life as well. Because the changes that most of us have experienced in our life, medicine you don't get for the same reason, in the same way, because they've made advances in that, right? But you do it and you go and you take the counsel of the doctors because they know what they're talking about. Come and ask me. come and ask me and prayerfully consider the fact that maybe God's brought me here for a reason. And I believe that. I believe he's brought me here for a reason, so that this church will have a hope in the future. I believe that's why he's here. Deb and I, we've asked this question, and then I'll have our call to worship. I wonder how I got here. Not from the hand of God, but when I look around and I hear what the people are feeling and how they're expressing what they're feeling, I wonder, how did I get voted into this church? Did God change some ballots or something? Because there seems to be enough upset that people are expressing that I'm like, where's the support that lends itself to the fact that I was at least, even in a small way, the majority vote to be here? That's the question that I have. So just open the dialogue and be willing to work with us, because we're not trying to take away your church. We're trying to give the church a dynamic, creative, life-giving presence in our community in this day and age. That's who we are. And that's where I stand this morning. So I just wanted you to hear that this morning as we get ready. Yeah, Ernie.